So glad you're here for our discussion group, June 8th, 2022. We are starting a new topic tonight, and that is how do you prove to someone that God exists? That someone might be you, or it might be a friend, or maybe you just want to talk about it to prepare yourself for a conversation in the future. So Joan is going to open us with prayer. Thank you, Joan.
Our loving triune God, we come before you this evening. We just thank you for being here, for bringing us together. We pray for those who can't be here, like Cassie, and for Carol and Clotilde and those who are suffering right now. We just thank you that you are the God that cares about us, and you care about these people that are in pain. So we just thank you for being there with them, encouraging them, and that I thank you that Anne has organized people to visit Carol, and she'll do the same for Clotilde, because Carol was so used to being on Zoom and connecting, and we miss her. So we thank you, dear Lord, that we can connect in different ways. And we just come before you tonight asking you to bless our time together and what we say and learn. It's hard for those of us who believe in you to understand someone who can't believe in a creation, in a creator. We watch these little robins on our back porch light, building the nest, sitting on the eggs, hatching these little babies, and then off they flew and they're gone. But how they knew what to do, that's instinct that you put in them, dear Lord. And we look at the creation around us and just marvel, knowing that that just didn't happen, that you are the creator, that it takes a mind greater than ours to have created this world and creating humans, and the marvel of the human body and our minds and what we can do and think. So please just help us, show us how we could explain or even just share this topic with those who believe that everything just evolved and there is no mind behind it, that you don't exist. And for us, that's, for me especially, will be difficult, because I can't imagine how any of this could have come into existence without a mind, a creator greater than all of it. So we thank you for being here and for having called us to understand about you, and just help us and give us the skills that we need, or even just the love and understanding to talk with someone else about proving that you do exist. And so we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. Beautiful. We mentioned the robins. We have some hummingbirds that built a nest on our wire in our back porch, and the baby birds are out there like perched on the edge, like they're just about ready to start using their wings. And oh, are they gone?
No, they're
okay. They tucked down. They tucked down. It's amazing watching how fast those hummingbirds grow.
Yeah. And once we got up one morning and they were gone.
Gone. Yeah, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I'm going to look
the fourth day now, you know, and we really miss them, because we could see the babies, their beaks peeking up and they're flapping their wings, and where did they go? You know, we haven't seen any of them.
So beautiful.
So, yeah. Marguerite gets them every year.
Every year.
2 or 3 times a year or whatever.
They build a new nest every year. They don't use the same nest over.
Yeah.
So
do we knock that nest down or leave it? We haven't been out in our backyard or turned on the porch light or anything. Because,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Research that. Well, that kind of is a great segue leading into talking about creation and the creator. And so last week we pulled up our list of topics that we started in 2018, if you can believe that. And we looked at the ones we have not yet discussed, and we went around and everybody chose their top 3, and then we narrowed it down to the top 2, and then we all took a vote. And this is the topic that was the most requested, and that is, how do we prove to someone, how do we attempt to prove to someone that God exists? And I think Stanley threw that word attempt in there because that's a good word. It's a good qualifier. You know, this conversation probably could be answered in one sentence, but I'd like to go through and talk about it. And there are a lot of arguments that are used, and proofs are really only used in mathematics, as most of you probably know. Stanley can probably share that. There's no way to concretely prove. You can prove 2 and 2 is 4, but I can't even prove to you that I exist. So proving things is very difficult, but you can argue, like you can argue a case. You go into court and you have all of your arguments and your evidences. Here's all the evidences that I have that this person is guilty of this crime. And that's kind of the same way we can approach this. We can probably make a very long list of evidences we have for the existence of God. And at the end of the day, you have to choose whether or not to look at those evidences and come to the conclusion, yes, I believe there is a God. There are people who can look at all those evidences and say, nah, I don't think there's a God. And to explain why that is, that there can be 2 human beings that can look at the same evidences and come to different conclusions, only God can answer that, right? I think at the end of the day, you're here because you believe God exists. And I would like to discuss, and I'll start with, I'm going to go around and ask everybody what you hope to get out of this conversation. I would like to explore how to have conversations with people who do not believe in God, to be respectful, but to give a good answer for why I believe in God, and respect them even if they choose not to. That's kind of what I'm hoping to get out of it. So does anybody else want to share? I can either just start at the top of my screen and go around, or if you want to wave at me and let me know why you what you hope to get out of this discussion, which might end up being 1 or 2 nights. Yeah, Stephanie.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, you said it all. I mean, that's exactly what probably all of us want to know, want to be able to, because we know that we believe it, but like you said, to be respectful and not put anybody down, and not, how do you go about it is the important thing. So you don't step on people's toes, hurt people's feelings, turn them away, make them hate God, whatever, you know what I mean?
And that has been done. Definitely.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can't beat somebody into it. I mean,
No, you cannot. You might be able to love them into it, but just can't.
That's what we need to do. Love them into it.
That's right.
Yep.
Stanley, what do you hope to get out of this conversation?
Well, I'm interested in other people's viewpoint of the topic, and it's very, I want to learn other people's viewpoints. I have some ideas myself. I'd like to share some of those. And
awesome. Well, we want to
not necessarily original ideas, but other ideas.
probably scientific ideas, I imagine, or philosophical, as
Yeah.
you like to add to the conversation. And there are a lot of those, and some of them will twist up your mind and be hard to understand, but we'll do our best to get into some of those. Awesome, Stanley. What about you, Joan?
Well, what you said, what Stephanie said, but for me, I need to learn how to be humble and I don't know, kind. I don't know how to word it. I get passionate, and so learn how to quell that in myself so I don't get overbearing.
You get excited and you're yelling.
Yeah, right, because I just don't understand how anyone could not see that God exists.
Yeah.
And and then when it gets to abortion, that's the other topic I am so passionate about that I have to really be careful. And so I need to just help in learning how to speak calmly and lovingly, and don't turn people away.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great desire. And I think a lot of it goes back to what we believe about God. If we believe that God has already chosen each one of us, and he loves us no matter what we believe about him, then we can relax into it and not feel like we have to convince everybody to believe exactly how we believe. That even if they don't believe in him, he's got that. That's not outside of his control, and he can lead them into that relationship, and maybe he'll use us, like we talked about, loving them to believe in him.
But we don't want to be an impediment in the way.
I want to be an obstacle. You're right.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that.
Stumbling block.
Miss Janice, I'm not sure if you knew we were talking about this topic, but after you've heard a few people say something, what would you hope to get out of a conversation like this?
Yeah, I didn't know what the topic was until I read it, but I think mine's is more how to be an example, to be not so much to convince them as to be it. How do I be it? How do I exhibit that? So that will show, that in itself will show them that there is a God. You know what I'm saying? That not.
Oh, I love that.
So much to just, just talk about it. And then how to interject that in just a regular conversation, how to bring his word into a conversation that you're just having a casual conversation with someone. How do you bring God into that so that he's visible in it? They may pick up on it and they may not, but still his word is the one that's being spoken, not yours.
That's good. There's probably a quote out there somewhere, but what you said makes me think, we need to live like there's a God. We just, and when our lives are just overflowing with him and his goodness,
They won't be able to help but see it.
we don't need to try to logically convince somebody necessarily, right? And that's what we're called to do. We're called to be witnesses of the reality that we live in, the kingdom. So that's beautiful, Janice. Thank you. All right, Mark, what do you hope to get out of this conversation?
It's always good to remind ourselves. It's funny, we believe, and sometimes we take that belief for granted. It's weird, some of the things we take for granted, or we believe it so well, we don't think about it very often, especially in the context of sharing that with somebody else. So to be able to have words at the ready, again, not so much to convince someone, but to give food for thought to others who may not believe. And some people might disbelieve out of hand that God doesn't exist, and they haven't even really thought about it. But with what we discuss during our time together, if we share that with someone else as they ask or inquire, that could give them something to think about and to ponder. Because I think we all agree it's not our job to convince somebody that God exists. If I believe in God, then I believe that my God can transform and work with somebody to reveal himself, as opposed to me trying to make somebody believe something, especially if they adamantly do not. Or sometimes might have better, stronger proofs than we do, or they're more passionate about their proofs that God doesn't exist than we are about our proofs that God does.
That's a great point. Sometimes you might feel ill-equipped to argue with an adamant, well-resounded scientist. Right. That's what I'm saying. I love how you put that. And honestly, can you really convince somebody of something against their will?
He who was convinced
against his will is of the same opinion still. Yes. So welcome, Cassie and Marguerite. We are going around and sharing what we hope to get out of the conversation that we're having, this new topic of discussion, which is, how do we prove to someone, how do we attempt to prove to someone that God exists? And so far, what we have said is, out of this conversation, we hope to learn how to talk to people respectfully who do not believe in God. to be able to speak well and informed of why we do believe in God, to learn to live like God exists and use our example, to maybe calm our passion and the ferocity with which we believe certain things, to be able to listen well to other people and somehow understand how they could have an opinion that God doesn't exist, but still remain loving and respectful, to be able to think about it more and to maybe explain it in a way that is not necessarily combative, but is still very eloquent and sounds what would you say, respectful, or that somebody would listen to and go, oh yeah, that makes sense, logical maybe. So those are the things I think we've said so far. Cassie, do you want to unmute and share with us what you hope to get out of this conversation, since I think you voted for it last week? Just trying
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me? Okay. I would have to say, I've been in an Uber and a Lyft before, and the person was like, you need to do this, and it's not put so much pressure about religion on someone, saying you should be doing this, this, and this, and if you don't do this, you're not following the rules. I would say the rules and how much pressure, if you put pressure on someone to join a religion, you're just going to lose them really quickly. Does that make sense?
Right. So you're saying that you're equating the belief in God with all the rules that come along with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I get what you're saying. Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, Cassie. Marguerite?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute and it wasn't working. I just would like I would like to learn from others how their approach in speaking with someone who's an unbeliever. I kind of wanted to hear everybody's input as to how to talk to someone who's not a believer. A very valuable thing I learned from you, Anne, is to ask the questions, not to tell, to listen. And that's really valuable, and I've tried to hold on to that. So I'd just like to hear other people's input on that.
Awesome. That's great. I think we can accomplish what we set out tonight, and maybe even more. Let's see. I think I'll go ahead. I was trying to think how to I've got a video that is short. It's like 3 or 4 minutes, and it talks about whether or not we can prove God exists. So I think I'll start with that, and then we will maybe bounce off of that video. And I also have listed probably 10 different arguments. So as I was saying before everybody was on, that proofs are really only really provable in math. Math is really, even science does not have hard and fast proofs. A lot of the proofs in science always have an assumption to it. You have to assume a certain thing before you can prove a certain thing. Like, for instance, all men are mortal, right? You think, oh yeah, I can prove that, but you can't, because you're not immortal and you can't live long enough to see if everybody lives forever. So you have to assume that everybody has died up to this point and everybody will die but it's an assumption. And the proof is based on that assumption in science. So there are logical arguments like that really the only thing that we can really prove is mathematics, because it's a hard, fast science of like 2 + 2 = 4. But even within mathematics, I'm sure Stanley can share, you get into physics and that kind of thing, and there's a lot of things that are not provable. There are assumptions that you have to start with. And it's just like that when we're talking about God. So what we talk about, instead of proofs and proving God exists, we're going to talk about arguments, as if you were in a court of law and you were trying, and Cassie, you're a true crime junkie like me. In a court of law, you have all of your arguments as to why this person did the crime, and you list them. And by the time you get to that 9th or 10th or 11th piece of evidence, you're like, I'm convinced he's the murderer, you know? And that's kind of how we're going to approach this. We're going to talk about all kinds of different evidences. And you can tell me as we go through it, that's the one that got me. Maybe it was creation. You look at creation and you're like, that design absolutely demands a designer. That's what convinced me. Or maybe it was, you were studying the human body and how it heals itself and that kind of thing. And maybe that was the thing that convinced you that God exists. Or maybe it was a personal experience, like Grandma Carol shares about laying in the field and looking up at the sky, and just this presence of God came upon her and said, I see you, I love you, and you're part of something bigger than yourself. That was a personal experience. Nobody can take that away from her. I can't prove it happened. She can't even prove it happened, but it's an experience that is an evidence for her of the existence of a creator, loving God. So that's kind of how we're going to approach it. We're going to approach it from the format of evidences and arguments, and there'll be layers upon layers. And some will be harder to understand than others because they're scientific and they're philosophical, but we'll try to touch upon most of them. At least you will have heard them before when you have a conversation with somebody else. Who said that? And I think it was Mark. Sometimes people who don't believe in God can come in with a lot of strong arguments and you're caught off guard. Like, oh man, I don't know what to say about that. So hopefully this will help you to solidify your beliefs, and then you can then be secure in them and you can have a relaxed conversation with somebody who believes the opposite. So that's my hope and prayer. And I just said all of that, and now Ariana's joining, but she'll have to go back and watch all that preamble. So
sometimes we're asked the question, can we prove the existence of God? And you know, it's a strange idea, because in one sense there's a moral intuition that something exists. Like Immanuel Kant talked about two great realities that basically inspired him: the starry heavens above, the moral law within. So there was a basic awareness. And I remember that even as a child. I didn't overtly believe in a God that I followed, but I believed that there was a God out there. It was almost like there was some sense. So can we prove that God exists? I think there are evidential trails, but not proof in the sense of a mathematical proof like 2 + 2 = 4. I think what we use is a sense of arguments that look for what we call the argument towards the best fit. Cumulative case arguments. So we look at various things, like in a murder case, or a case trying to prove the issue of the guilt of someone in a crime. You have to gather evidence from many different pieces, and the cumulative case argument adds up. In that sense, I think we can point towards the existence of God, the probabilities, but it's not the same as a mathematical proof.
If by prove we mean equating it with 100% certainty, then no, we cannot prove with 100% certainty the existence of God. But is the existence of God the most probable explanation for all that is? I think we have reasons, we have arguments that have come down through history that make the reasonableness of God and God's existence very, very probable and likely.
What do we mean when we say prove? Everyone should have a certain level of certainty that they're looking for, and 100% certainty is just out of the question. We can't be 100% certain that we even exist. We can't have 100% certainty that we're even here when we're talking from a philosophical standpoint. So the question is, how much certainty are you willing to have before you act or believe something? And that's what we need to come up with, thresholds of certainty. What is the most coherent explanation? What's the best explanation for the world around us? And if we look at it from that perspective, as we do everything in life, then we can have very good reason to believe that God exists.
Most of the time when people ask that kind of a question, they're looking for the type of proof that we really only find in mathematics and maybe some of the hard sciences. But that type of proof is really not necessary, it's not even helpful when we are trying to determine whether or not God exists and what our relationship with Him should be. What is more interesting is whether or not we can come to know that God exists and whether we can really have a relationship with him. And that is not a difficult question to answer, because the answer is yes. God has revealed himself to us in the person of Jesus Christ.
Well, I believe we attempt to prove God's existence or argue for God's existence because the evidence is so strong. It's so compelling that it seems almost illogical to argue against God's existence. So again, if somebody sets out to prove God's existence with 100% certainty, they're likely to be disappointed. But if they set out to show the reasonableness for the existence of God, then I think there are very strong arguments that can be made, and we can have some degree of satisfaction with that. There is grounding, there is a foundation for belief in God.
Okay. So hopefully that's a good introduction, beyond also us, each of us, saying what we would like to get out of this. And what I'll do now is I'm going to open up a blank document and take your comments based on what you heard in the video. And I'm going to go ahead and do that without sharing my screen at first, because I want to see your faces, but I'm going to be typing into the document what I hear you saying. So you are all muted because I muted you for the video, but if you would like to share something that you heard in that video that made sense to you, or maybe it sparked another thought that you had on this topic, feel free to unmute your microphone and wave at me and I will flag you on. So does anybody have a comment from the video? Was that helpful? What did you think? It was short and it said some of the same things that I had said. Okay, Joan.
I like the words reasonableness and probability.
Yeah.
And that you can't prove God's existence 100% with 100% certainty. So I like their use of words.
Yeah. Yeah, good comment. Yeah, it makes it, and does that give you a little bit more peace? Like you just need to explain the reasonableness of God existing, because because you can't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that he does exist. Yeah. Anybody else?
There's one of them that said something, you can't prove it like mathematics. That brings up to mind the thought there's something called Gödel's theorem. He said that in any system such as basic arithmetic, there are an infinite number of propositions you can make that you can't prove. And if you can, and the thing, and if a system is if it's complete, it's inconsistent. It's either, and if it's and if it's complete, it's not consistent. If it's consistent, it's not complete. So it kind of rocked the foundation of mathematics when he brought that up. His name is Gödel, G-O-D-E-L, Gödel's theorem.
I'm sorry, spell his name?
Like God, L, G-O-D-E-L.
That's his name? Wow.
Yeah, his name is German. He's a German. They're Austrian, I think.
God.
Wow.
Because L means God.
Yeah, that's
The word
true.
for God. So, wow.
But it's called Gödel, I think. Gödel,
Yeah.
because it's German.
Yeah.
So if
The
it's,
German language.
so you,
But it's one of the most revolutionary things in mathematics that ever happened.
so he proposed that if a system is complete, then it's inconsistent. And if it's consistent, then it's incomplete.
Yeah, there's there are a lot of things you can make a lot of propositions that may be true, but they can't be proved in that system. You have to go to a higher system or something like that to prove them.
Wow.
And just on infinitum.
Wow. Thank you, Stanley. We're going to run across some things that are kind of mind-boggling like that, but you'll just have to hang on to. If you don't completely understand them, it's okay. It's not complete. Okay, so I'm writing this down. So anybody else want to share what you thought of the video, or if it sparked a new thought about the topic?
When you trying to prove God exists, it also depends not totally intellectually. It's about what you desire, what you want, what you're afraid of, what you desire. That's determinant of what you will allow as evidence.
Yeah. Very good, Stanley. That's awesome. I love it. Okay, so I will share my screen and show you some of the notes I've been taking in preparing for this. And then maybe that will spark some more discussion. So I'm going to make this much bigger so that we start at the top. These are just my random notes. They're not finished or anything, but I was just gathering stuff. So can you prove that God exists? And if somebody said that to me, prove to me God exists, maybe a follow-up question would be, well, what would you take as an acceptable level of proof? Do you need to see God come down in front of you and talk to you? Do you need to see a baby born? I mean, for me, that's incredible. That's a proof right there. Usually when people say that, they're calling for scientific proof for God's existence, right? They want some kind of scientific proof that they can hard and fast hold on to. But even atheists and scientists, and I guess based on what Stanley just said, mathematicians, all have a level of faith that they operate from. Nobody can operate from 100% certainty, and certainly no system either. So the proof is a logical deduction from assumed truths. That's what a proof is. And proofs rely on assumptions. So let's see, I kind of made this too small. Let's make this bigger. So philosophers and theologians from the beginning of time have set out to answer this question about God, and it's made many of them famous, but none of them have undoubtedly proven that God exists. But they also have not proven that God doesn't exist. So that leaves us kind of back where we started. Some would say it's pointless to try to prove or disprove a God, if he exists, that is completely beyond our understanding anyway, right? God is beyond our little brains fathoming a God that created not just our little world, but all of creation, the cosmos. And so how could we even think about proving he exists? We can't even wrap our mind around who he is. So it really comes down to this: do we believe in God or not, right? So that was just a call out box I typed in because I thought that was really foundational. Somebody else I was listening to said, maybe we're not talking about proofs, but we're talking about a worldview, a way of seeing reality. And those of you that are on this call today have chosen to believe in a reality where there is a creator who created us with a purpose, and this life has meaning, and you see order in it, and you see all these things that we're going to talk about. And so you're beginning this discussion with the assumption that God exists. And so I was just taking notes that even science begins with assumptions. And I talked about that already. All men are mortal. So science does not progress by proofs, even though maybe a lot of people would have you think that. To ask for somebody who doesn't believe in God exists, to ask a Christian to prove that God exists without any assumptions it's impossible. It's the impossible problem, right? Even an atheist cannot prove that they exist. So we have to start with the assumption that we have made based on the evidences. So let's look down at, I just showed you that video. There are arguments, not proofs, evidential arguments that God exists. Now, some people would use the Bible to prove that God exists. And I read this article by Don Stewart in the Blue Letter Bible, which a lot of you use. I know Stanley uses it, Mark uses it. And he wrote an article and he said the Bible it starts with the assumption in the beginning of the Bible that God exists. So it's really not setting out to prove that God exists. The assumption when you pick up the Bible is that God exists. Now, in the middle of reading the Bible, you might come to the conclusion that God exists, and that would be divine revelation for sure. But that's not the purpose of the Bible. The purpose of the Bible is for the people who believe he exists. So I'm going to go through a couple evidential arguments, and please flag me down if you have a question you want to add to it. The first one is the cosmological argument, or the first cause argument, or the universe must have a cause argument. So it's called by a number of different things, but this basically is the idea that God must exist because the universe exists. Who else could have made the universe unless it was a creator, right? Everything has a cause. Nothing just happens. If you see a broken vase over here, it didn't just break by itself. Something caused it. Could have been a baseball hit it, a child knocked it off the table, or
change in weather.
Change in weather. It could have gotten too cold or too hot, and mainly too cold, and cracked. And so the universe, so the idea of this first cause is that the universe must have a first cause. It's created, and therefore God exists. So someone or something must have created us, therefore there is a God. This is the argument. So there are, I listened to a video and they said this. Haven't done enough research to find out if it's true, but she said when scientists began to study the Big Bang Theory in the early 1930s, atheists tried to get rid of the Big Bang Theory because it supported the Christian idea that the universe had a beginning. And if the universe had a beginning, then something or someone must have kickstarted that process. And I thought that was really interesting. And I need to do a little more research to find out where she got that from, because I mean, obviously today, a lot of Christians don't believe in the Big Bang Theory. There are many who do. There are many who believe in the Big Bang Theory, but they believe that God caused the Big Bang. Yes, Cassie.
So they did it. So you're saying that they did the atheists did a study on it, so the atheists have to believe that there is a God, because if they had to shut down, they try to shut down because it went to Christian ideologically. So would they not be atheists then if they believe there is a God?
Oh, can you speak to it? Because I did not understand what she said.
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying, Cassie. Why would the atheists care what the Christians believe? Because if the atheists don't believe in a God, why do they care that Christians believe in the Big Bang? I mean, right? So they must have some bit of belief if it worries them.
Yeah, and you know, there are agnostics.
Well, ask her, is that correct? Is that
what you said? Did Mark understand what you said correctly? Yes. Okay. She got good job, Mark. Okay. So
I got you.
That kind of, maybe we should define some terms, because there are agnostics. Agnostics say, I don't know, there could be a God, maybe not a God. Nobody can prove it, so I'm just kind of okay with not knowing. Whatever, right? There are many atheists who have as much faith that you and I have in a God. They have that much faith that there isn't a God. And some of them have something to prove. So to your question, Cassie, some atheists are setting out to disprove that there is a God, but which kind of starts with the idea that there is a God, right? I mean, why else would they care? If there really isn't a God, then no big deal, right? Yeah, so that's a good
A lot of atheists do not believe in free will. And that brings up the question, well, if people don't have free will, how can they condemn a Christian for believing what they believe? Because they can't help it anyway.
That's a great point. Yeah, so some of the people that do not believe in this, or the pushback against this argument is they don't believe that everything has a cause. They don't believe that that's a true statement. And they also don't believe that just because we're the only life forms that we know of, that proves there's a creator. They believe we kind of exist out of luck. In fact, there are some ideas that some spin-off of life from another planet or another galaxy landed in our world, and that's what started life here. So, I mean, there's all kinds of, we don't know. So there's all kinds of philosophies out there, but that in a nutshell, that's kind of what we call the cosmological argument, basically that the universe must have a cause. The second argument is called the teleological argument, or easier to say, argument from design, that design demands a designer. Because the world is the perfect world for humans to live in it, it must have, they call finely tuned, it must have been designed perfectly for humans. Therefore, there is somebody who cared about that and created this world for human beings to live in. And so you think about air, perfect amount of oxygen, food, the way that plants reproduce, water, temperature, gravity, closeness to the sun, gases. If they were just off a microscopic amount, we would not exist. We would all be dead, right? So we look at those finely tuned aspects, and I think there's like, I don't even remember how many, there's a bunch of them, that if we were tilted one degree more this way or that way, we'd either freeze or burn up, or and you look around and you see even the way that we procreate and reproduce has kept humanity. It's part of this design, this finely tuned design. So we look at that, and believers say, well, there's purpose, there's design, somebody created all of this. And that shows, that proves, let's see, it's so complex, even the human body and the way it heals itself and does things, and the way, you know, a man and a woman can come together and create a new life form is part of this design. Isaac Newton said, in the absence of any other proof, the thumb alone would convince me of God's existence. So the fact that we can grab things and do things and create things, for him was proof that God existed. So, you know, Darwin came along and said the world wasn't created for man, but the man has adapted to the world and tried to disprove God through that. And then there's the other people that come up against this argument. They say, well, if God designed us, if God designed us, then who designed, I think that's supposed to say God, who designed God, right? God. And, you know, it kind of gets back to the idea, like, if everything's created, then who created God? Which has a philosophical merry-go-round there. You can go around on that forever. So that is the design demands a designer argument or evidence. Does anybody have anything they want to say about that before I move on to the next one? Okay. The next one, and these are in no certain order, is...
I had, excuse me,
Marguerite.
my
Yes,
hand up.
right.
Yeah. The answer that I've been given to all of that by unbelievers would be that they developed over time. It wasn't, they weren't created. No, it's just,
Yeah.
So that's
So-
that interesting thing that I would love to have a good answer for.
Yeah, so let me write that down. Maybe we can have a discussion about that. Yeah, and I read that too, like even what we have today would have taken, you know, eons and eons for this human body to have developed from, you know, an amoeba to get to the complexity that we have today. But there are people who choose to believe that, right? Yeah, so maybe we can let's I'm going to make a note to come back to that and have a discussion about, like, have a longer discussion about that. So another evidence that is given for there being a God is that creation demands a creator, and intelligence demands an intelligent creator. And looking at the difference even between animals and humans, animals have intelligence, but they don't have the same kind of intelligence and ability to communicate and create the way that human beings do. And so when you look at that, and, you know, I guess, Marguerite, the answer that would be given to you by these same people would be, well, you know, some got lucky over time and they got to be human beings and the other ones got to be turtles, you know. It's like, how did the creation, who, and this kind of leads into consciousness, right? Scientists can't even pinpoint what consciousness is. And, and animals, we don't know for sure. Do they have some, we can kind of say, yeah, they think they have a consciousness. They understand that they exist, but to the same degree that human beings do.
Self-awareness.
Yeah, that self-awareness, how do you pinpoint that? And why is a human being so different than, a goldfish? So that's another evidence that intelligence demands an intelligent creator and that there is a created order. And then life demands a life giver. So that I didn't write anything under that because that's kind of, it kind of is the same as some of the other ones, but it's listed on as different. Like to say that it all came from one amoeba, not to say that it couldn't, if God wanted to do it that way, that's up to him. But the fact that life was breathed into a creation just doesn't seem like an accident, right? I can't prove that, but that is an evidence. Another evidence, and this is a little complex, is called the ontological argument. And basically, at its simplest form, it's just the study of existence. Like, do we exist? And I think, let's see, there are different versions, but they all argue something like this. Because we can imagine a perfect being, there must be a God. The idea is that existing makes a good thing better than one that's only imaginary. So the perfect thing we're imagining must exist. This is really hard. It's a hard reasoning to get around, but we call that perfect thing God. So the earliest objection to this argument like this could prove wrong things. You could prove a perfect island must exist, for example, but no real island is perfect. So it's like, it's a philosophical thing that's really hard to explain, but the idea is simply that if we exist, there must be something better than us that exists as well. So that's a hard one to discuss. But I tried, oh, here we go. Because it starts with imagination, not what you can see or experience. This is a kind of a priori reasoning. Let's see, other versions of the argument start with the idea of the universe, and from that argument, there must be a God. So it's kind of, it's a philosophical thing, and I can't explain it very well because it's philosophical whether or not you can prove you exist. And if you do, then there must be a more perfect version, more perfect being above that. The next argument is the morality argument, that a law demands a lawgiver. So this kind of idea, you've probably heard this one before, that we have this built-in intrinsic instinctive sense of right and wrong, right? That points us, we kind of all know that murder is wrong, unless you're a sociopath, right? And we believe that was put there by a lawgiver. Someone outside of us put that law inside of us. And the Bible speaks to this. And when we read that, we go, yes, that's true. I've experienced that. I have a conscience and I know when it's wrong to lie or to kill or to commit adultery or to rape somebody or to steal somebody's property. It's like I didn't need the 10 commandments on stone. I know inside of me that that's wrong. And there kind of is overall an idea that things are wrong. Now there's a lot of gray areas where people just don't think it's wrong to take somebody else's things. Or Marguerite, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. This particular one is covered really well, I believe anyway, by C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity.
Yes.
That book is the clearest explanation to me of God, that he exists. I've given it away many times. I'm currently without a copy, but I just love the logic of it and how it builds on,
Yeah, maybe we should take a look at some of his stuff because he was an atheist, right? Who set out to prove that God didn't exist, and he came to be a very firm believer who produced a lot of works, including the Chronicles of Narnia and Mere Christianity, like you said, and Devil's Screw Tapes. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. He explains his logical point of view, and he also covers the opposite point of view. You know, from when he was an atheist, he's telling how he became convinced.
Yes.
I was just reading that book the other day, that part.
C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great, Marguerite. That's really helpful. Well, maybe we'll dig into that a little bit more next time. Another argument is the aesthetic argument, and that is the idea that art and beauty point us to something outside of us, right? When you sit and you at the top of a mountain and you look at the beauty. So there's a man named Francis Collins who headed the Human Genome Decoding Project, and he began that project as an atheist and he ended as a believer. And one of the things he said was the object of all great art is beauty, and it makes us nostalgic for God. And so maybe he's another one that we could look at his writings, but that art and beauty, right, require an artist, you know, and that God is that great artist. So that's the aesthetic argument. And then coming back to, I think Stanley was the one who said desire, right? It comes down to your desire. And feeling that there is more to this world than what we see before us, and that we don't really belong here. This is not our ultimate home. I think is a deep inner like knowing and longing, like there's got to be something more than this. And C.S. Lewis had a quote, I was looking for it, but he basically says that he knows he was made for another world. And it's that desire that there is more, and you're willing to have faith in a supernatural, in a heaven, in an afterlife, because of that instinctual desire inside of you that says there's got to be more than this. And Mark and I were talking about this beforehand. Like, I'm like, I choose to believe, because I could not live in a world where I didn't think that there was more than this, and that my life didn't have purpose. That's just me. And so I choose to look at the evidences and go, yep, there's a God, and I believe in him, and I talk to him, and I try to listen to him through the means that he gives. And I don't require him to come face to face with me and talk to me and prove himself to me. I believe because it's wired into me to believe in a higher power. And I believe that. That's me. And yet other people could look at the same evidences and go, no, that doesn't do it for me. I need more. And I'm not sure why that is, like I said at the beginning, but that is the desire argument. I desire to believe, and I'll just be honest. That's my desire, and so I do, and my life is very fulfilling because of that. Yeah, Cassie, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, so my question is, why do non-believers want to see something so badly from a Christian or any like basically Pentecostal, like I don't know other religions very well, but why do people want to have proof right in front of them, like we're like magicians? But it's not. What he gives us is spiritually. So why do they try and fight you if he doesn't give me this? He doesn't like basically help me pay for my rent and just give me money. Why do they just give up so easily?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it definitely fits right under this desire argument. Does anybody, I mean, I don't have the answer as to why people don't believe. And that's kind of what you're saying. Like, they're kind of saying, I'm right unless you prove it to me that I'm wrong. Does that make sense? Like,
but yeah, but in physical form, not spiritually, but physical form.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, Janice, do you want to add to that?
I think that people don't want to believe. That means that they have to change. They think that they have to be the one to change themselves. They've already been
trouble hearing you, Janice. Can you get closer to your phone?
Yeah.
Yeah, they
I don't know. I can't hear her.
can't hear me at all.
It's like your microphone's going out or something.
I don't know what it is on my phone. It's like they are doctoring the culture of where they are, and they think that if they believe that there's a God, that they themselves have to change themselves in order to whatever they think God is. So they don't want to change. Okay. They don't need anything. There's nothing else I need. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. Everything's good. Don't need it. It's all right. So I think that most atheists believe that they would have to change. That's why they have so much animosity or want to fight against it, because they don't understand that they don't have to do the changing. God will do the changing for you. You just have to believe that he can do it. So
Yeah.
I think they think that I'm okay. I'm good. My work is good. I got money. I got my kids are fine. Whatever life they live, it's okay the way it is. They don't think that they need anything other than what they already have.
That's a great comment, and I know it was hard to hear everything Jenna said, but maybe I can try to summarize. You can give me a thumbs up. You're basically saying a lot of people don't believe in God because they fear that they would have to give up so much of life that is fun and pleasurable, and so and they'd have to surrender. They'd have to die to themselves. They'd have to forgive people and calm their anger, and so then, Kathy, what happens is then when they don't have any more money, or they lose somebody, or they lose a job, then they're angry at God because, well, if you're God, you wouldn't let that happen to me, when all along, they weren't really trying to have a relationship with him anyways. And if they did have a relationship with him, they would understand God never said he wouldn't let bad things happen. In fact, he promised they would. And what he did promise was that he would be with us relationally through those bad things. And so when people say, oh, God didn't pay my rent, or if God was a good God, he wouldn't let this happen, and I'm kind of being snarky, but I mean, tragedies do happen, and people do question, where is God when bad things happen? But that's life. And God never promised to change life to fit us. He said, I'm going to be with you so you can go through life with me. And so, yes, people are going to do bad things, and people are going to be hurt, and there's going to be grief, but he wants to be with us through it. It's about a relationship, not about taking care of every little specific need in our life. So that was a great comment, Janice. Thank you so much. And Marguerite, I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, my experience with atheists are two kinds. One, they are already successful and they feel like they did it all on their own and they don't need God. And the other one is they're angry with God, and usually it's because they've had a very negative experience with Christians.
Very good comment, right? There are things that have caused you to believe in God. Well, there are equal things that have caused people to not believe in God. And you're right. Sometimes very smart, wealthy people who are privileged and have a lot going on. You work hard, you do well. You don't work hard, you don't do well. It's pretty simple, right? That's their stance. Or they've been very hurt and very wounded, and they're angry at God and because of either A, he didn't answer their prayers like they thought he should, or B, they've been hurt by Christians, by his people. So yeah, great comment. Great comment. Anybody else have
to piggyback off the, I actually know someone that is hurt by God because they didn't get the answers prayed right away, so they turned away from God, and they just basically don't want anything to do with God anymore. They think he's just this mythical creature that we just worship.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I'm just like,
and you know,
but and I don't know.
all you can say to that is that, you know, you're feel free to have that belief, but I choose to believe. I've seen evidences in my life that where I believe, because if you start with that premise, you can prove that premise with just looking around. You just look around at the evil in the world and you're like, yeah, there's no God. I mean, you can prove it either way. It's your choice of which way you're going to believe. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Comments. Now, just a side note, if you're talking with somebody who has been hurt by Christians and that's why they don't believe in God, it's a great time to apologize on behalf of Christians. I've done that many times for different things. I've apologized on behalf of white people. I've apologized on behalf of GCI or WCG. I've apologized on behalf of Christians. That's the way of Jesus. To just own it. You don't have to defend it. Just own it and say, wow, people, Christian believers, don't always get it right. We're human beings too. And we're a mess and we're broken. And I'm really sorry for that hurt that was caused by somebody who wore the name Christian or believer. So yeah, that's a great time to build a bridge that way. And even if they never come to believe God, that's still a good thing to do. Okay, let's finish up the argument. Oh, it's 12 after 8. I really ran over. Sorry about that, guys. Well, we kind of started late, didn't we? Let me just finish the green. I'm just going to read through them. We have the resurrection argument, which is a really strong one, which is if Jesus really rose from the dead, and there's all kinds of proofs about that, and proofs or evidences, then he surely must have been God, right? The only person we know that actually was raised from the dead, that there's like historical accounts. There's also the personal experience argument, like I spoke of at the beginning, like Carol had that experience as a 6-year-old in a field with God, and nobody's been able to convince her that there's no God. Fulfilled prophecy. You can go through and look at prophecies that were written and happened thousands of years later. Like, that's incredible. Like, how does that happen? Is that just a coincidence? Answered prayer. Maybe in your life, you prayed a very specific prayer and it was answered and you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that God exists. And then the last one, a way of life that works. You know, the way of Jesus, who is the perfect representation of God, it works. It just works. And if no other reason that you believe God exists, it would be because his way works. His way of peace and his way of love is a way that works. So we have more to discuss next time. So I'm going to bring, we'll maybe look at C.S. Lewis, maybe some of his writings, his quotes, and also address Marguerite's comment, which is that she's gotten from unbelievers, which is, hey, it just all developed over time. It didn't really take a creator to make all this. It just took time. Time is the great creator, right? Are there any other questions or thoughts that you would like to see us bring up next week as we continue in this discussion? Janice?
I think that just for myself, mine is more personal.
Okay.
And so, and then the way help that I know that he exists. That's mine.
You proved
mine
it personally. Yeah. Awesome. Anybody else have a subtopic of this big topic that maybe we should address next time we get together next Wednesday?
There's something to say for Revelation, because God reveals himself to people. He revealed to Peter that Jesus was the Christ.
Yeah, I have one more argument, but I'll bring that up next time. But yeah, Revelation. There's personal revelation, and then there's, of course, the revelation through Jesus Christ. Absolutely. There's so many historical documents that he existed. I mean, that's a pretty good proof. And that's why Lee Strobel wrote The Case for Christ, right? So I will maybe pull some things from his book. We can look at that next time. And I think most in the beginning, we all shared what we were hoping to get out of this. And I think most of us were hoping to have some better, I don't call them strategies, but just some ideas on how to have a conversation with somebody who does not believe in a respectful manner. So maybe we can talk about that and maybe just have a few bullet points of things we can do, like listening, asking questions versus just jumping in with all of our arguments and all of our knowledge, right? So we can talk about that as well. I think that will at least cover one more meeting, depending on where the conversation goes. Was this helpful at all? Yeah, okay, Marguerite, and then Joan.
I would be interested in open-ended questions to facilitate discussion.
Awesome. Yeah, let's get a list of questions. That would be great. Joan?
When this is all done, will you send out your
Notes? Absolutely.
your notes? Yes.
Oh, yes, I would love to share.
I mean, I was copying as we go, but copying the screens, but if you would just send, because I'm sure you're going to add to what you got there. So
I'll keep that. At the end, I'll send you a complete version, and I'd try to quote my sources too. So, okay, well, let's close in prayer, and then we'll reconvene next week and keep digging into this. This is helpful for me, I'll just say, to have to do all this research. I believe in God. I don't know that there's anything that would convince me that he's not real, but this is really helpful to just go through it, organize it, and then discuss how I can have a conversation with somebody who doesn't believe the way I do and not be threatened by it. So I'll go ahead and close in prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for who you are. I thank you that you do exist and you've revealed yourself to each one of us on this call today in ways that are very personal and very real. And we pray for continued revelation in our moments of doubt, because we all have doubt, even in the midst of our belief. So we thank you that you are such a good God, that you never doubt us, that you believe in us, and that your faithfulness will endure even for those who don't believe. We believe that you are such a generous God, that you have a way, you know exactly what it's going to take for each person to come into a personal relationship with you. So thank you for your faithfulness and your goodness. And we just pray that you'll bring us back next week to continue this discussion, and that you will lead us through the power of the Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will stop recording, and feel free to stay on, and maybe we'll see a baby. Maybe we'll have a baby sighting.